And so that I said, when can I connect with him more with caregiving, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's cranky? I want to say that the one thing is I truly love who I am. When's a good time for me to be able to care for myself without ignoring him?
And welcome to Sessions from the Edge. This series exists for one reason, and that is to restore agency and purpose to every life touched by chronic illness. And I say every life because some of them are patients, others are functional health professionals, and Donna falls into that category. And the subject of today, or where I'd really like to draw into, is about being a carer. So we sit at the edge, the moment where diagnosis, responsibility, or prolonged uncertainty begins to reshape identity, where people are still functioning on the outside, but quietly losing their sense of authorship on the inside. Today's conversation is especially relevant for anyone living with, caring for, or making decisions alongside chronic illness. My guest is Dr. Donna Blevins. Now, she's in her mid-70s at the moment, but to say Donna has had a full life would be an absolute understatement. This new year, for instance, she jumped out of a perfectly good aeroplane, not something I'd do on a guess, but anyway, and that's a story for another time because she spent a few weeks not being able to move and so on. So this is the sort of person Donna is. She's a best-selling author. She's had a real estate business. She just told me she was a woman of the night back in the day. She's pleaded to a white-collar felony. She's a clinical psychologist and performance specialist whose work focuses on how people make decisions when the stakes are real and certainty is gone. She's the founder of Big Girl Poker, where women learn self-trust, emotional regulation, and agency in environments defined by risk rather than control. But that is not why she's here. Alongside her clinical work, she's spent significant time as a carer, holding responsibility, emotional steadiness, and long-term uncertainty for someone else. In fact, the first time we were scheduled to come on this particular recording, her husband was rushed to hospital and she's had to deal with that condition as well. So it's ongoing. This conversation isn't about curing illness or fixing people. It's about what happens when life changes and you still have to choose, how agency can be rebuilt when outcomes aren't guaranteed, and how purpose can return not by fighting reality, but by learning how to live and act with it. So Donna, welcome to Sessions from the Edge.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. I mean, it's just wonderful that we are on the opposite side of the world. That to me is huge. I told my husband, he had a caregiver here this evening, and I said, honey, I'll be on, I don't know how long, but I will be on an international podcast live.
Well, I'm honored to have you on my international podcast.
One of the things you said that I think is really important when you're talking about caregiving, these are some statistics that I came across recently that just blew my mind. It said that people over 70 who start caregiving are 70 times more probable to die before the one they're caring for.
Really?
Because the biggest problem is that caregivers most oftentimes ignore self-care.
Yes. Yes. And you've lived in the reality of being a carer. So what did that teach you about how people behave under sustained pressure? Because you've just said that under that pressure, people typically die before the one they're caring for. So how did you do it?
Well, I'm blessed because my mother, Mama Peggy, came to share her home with us in 2002, and she was with us for 20 years. And her life graduation, that was her words, by the way. She said, "I ain't dying, I'm graduating." And her life graduation was in 2022, and she had taught me how to be a good caregiver
Mm.
because mother had declined in some instances. Fortunately, they said, "Well, she probably has Alzheimer's." This was like in 2003, and I said, "No, Mama does not have that. You don't understand. I know what's happening with her. She may have mild dementia, but it's not that." People who have Alzheimer's usually live to be about 5 or 6 years with that. But Mother's with us for 20 years, so I'm certain that we were able to interrupt it possibly. I had shared with her years ago, "Stop using aluminum cookware, Mom, because the
Mm.
aluminum is a primary cause of the Alzheimer's." And she taught me how to be a caregiver without being a helicopter daughter.
Yeah.
Be because that was my biggest problem, is that I really wanted to take care of her, but Mother was extraordinarily independent. I remember in 2019, before COVID hit, I'm hovering over her, looking at what she's reading in the newspaper, because Mother read the newspaper every single day. She was up at 5 o'clock. She went out to the mailbox. She got the newspaper, came back in. She's reading the newspaper. She's playing with the dogs. And I'm looking at, she looked up at me and she said, "Stop hovering. You are not my mother. Get the hell out." And Mother never said hell. She said, "Get the hell out of here and go back to playing poker." Went, "Gosh, thanks, Mom." And she taught me the importance of allowing the one being cared for to be as independent as they can be and to facilitate that. And my husband, he I'm 6'5", he's 5'3",
Oh, okay.
and by the way, he has a nickname. We're standing side by side, and he's about right here,
Yeah.
and we call him Tit High. That's his nickname. But it was important because as he was declining, I said, "Honey," when he was in the hospital 2 weeks ago or a month ago, it was that point where they were going, "Do you want to have the DNR, the do not resuscitate?" And we had always had the fact that, of course, resuscitate him. And he went, I want to have the DNR." And I said, "Whoa, what's going on? Are you ready to leave? Whatever you choose." And he said, "Well, it's that I don't want to be as much responsibility for you."
Mm.
I said, "I can understand that. But do you want to be more comfortable? Do you want to have less pain? Do you want to do things together more?" He said, "Well, yes." I said, "Okay. And what you're gonna find is that one of the reasons your pain is increasing is because you have pain, you lay down more, you don't walk as much. Your core gets weak, therefore your pain is gonna get more." I said, "I don't care if it's 5 minutes every hour. Get your butt up and walk around." And by the way, Mama Peggy's motto was, "To stay above the grass, you gotta get your butt up." So
I love it. That's gonna be a quote. I'm gonna do that as a quote in one of those notes when we
absolutely.
bring this out.
I think, Paul, I think the situation is to be a good caregiver, it's important for you to first care for yourself, take care of your self-care is so overlooked,
Mm.
and to have as much of a conversation with the one you're caring for. Sometimes I'm in a hurry doing something, and I want to rush, and he's slow, and I just kinda just go, "Settle down, go into the zen." It's like the zen of caregiving. So I think that's the biggest thing that I can counsel people because effectively, I've been a caregiver for 25 years,
Mm.
and Mama Peggy, she cared for my father for 30 years. In
Right.
1970, he was a brakeman on the railroad. I was married my brother was my brother had graduated from college, and he was in the Air Force. So mother had filed for a divorce from dad. He was not a nice guy.
Right.
And daddy broke his back, and he became a semi-paraplegic, and mother allowed the divorce to expire, and she took care of the son of a bitch for 30 years.
Wow.
So, with that said, so I guess I come from a family of caregivers because
Yeah.
even goes back to her. God, I guess it's in the blood because her mother, my grandmother. Oh God, I've never told this story before. So grandpa moved out of the house and was living with another woman.
Oh, okay.
Okay, dad got divorced because I was raised strict Southern Baptist, and this was Southern Baptist, and this was in the mountains of Virginia. I'm laughing so hard I've got to wipe my nose. And mother got a call. Grandmother got a call from the woman he was living with, and Lillian was my grandmother's name. And the woman said, "Lillian, you're going to have to come and take care of Jim because he had a stroke and he keeps asking for you."
So I have him back. Refund.
So she, after he was in the hospital, grandma had him brought to the house and had a hospital bed put in the living room, and she cared for him for several months before he died.
Wow. Wow.
I never thought of it being caregiving being in the blood.
Yeah.
Well,
So it's
I
familiar, huh?
guess so.
So you talk about, you know, your own agency and your own self-care. So you enjoy poker. Not only do you enjoy it, you're a professional at it. And so with poker, your work environment, well, there's certainty is rare in there, and it's, you know, it's the stakes are really high. So what drew you there? Was it an avenue to get away from being a caregiver, or was it just something that was a natural passion? Or and how do you find it sort of fits into being a caregiver as well?
Okay, I go back to 1996. We have a real estate company, and I am the Department of Veterans Affairs management broker, real estate management broker. I took custody of properties the VA acquired because of the foreclosure process.
Mhm.
I was the management broker for 5 counties in Florida. And when I took custody of them, it was more than 200 properties, and I had to go see each property every month. So when poker came into Florida, it was in the bingo hall, the Indian bingo halls, and they put a few card tables there, and there was an article in the paper. We were working 17 hours a day, 7 days a week. It was ridiculous, and I was getting exhausted. I mean, I was not caring much for myself there.
Mm, mm.
And when it was in the paper, I said to my husband, "Would you teach me how to play poker? I'd kinda like to go, like, for some entertainment." And I could see the thought gears turn in his head. It was like, "Huh, poker's a guy's game, but if I teach her and she likes it, I'll get to play more." Not that I care, but there wasn't any place for him to play in Florida. Had come from California, and there was plenty of places to play there. And he said, "Sure." So he taught me how to play, and it was simply as entertainment. And shortly thereafter, I can't tell you exactly the date, but it was in 1996. I'm in a hand, and I'm looking at cards, and I'm thinking about I have cards in my hand, and I'm thinking about the contractor that I've been dealing with that day and what a problem he was, and he has to take care of this. And then I thought about, oh, tomorrow I've got to write specifications for another job. And it was as if a voice spoke to me, and I heard, wait, there's only one thing that ever exists. It's the hand that you're in. The past cards are gone. The future cards are never here. And it was an amazing moment where all of a sudden I went into the zone and everything else disappeared around me at that table. That was when I say poker saved my life, because if it hadn't been for poker, today, 25 years later, wow, I would probably be dead from stress or suicide.
Yeah, right. What was it? Was it the relief, that zone, getting into the flow? I mean, there's you're describing there that concept of flow. So, even in my book, there's a thing I write in there. I have a concept called the knife edge of time, and living in that now instead of the future, instead of the past. What about that particular moment? Were you able to get back into that moment regularly? And why has it saved you from suicide? Why has it saved you from stress-related issues? What about that moment? What about that feeling, that sensation, that interaction with your mind? I don't know. What is it?
Regardless of how much is going on around you, when you sit down at a table, even if you're in a tournament that has 2,000 entries, you're only playing against the people at your table.
Mm.
No one else exists, just this table. I call it the finite universe of poker. And when you can say, okay, I'm going to sit down and only this exists, I turn off my phone. Actually, the only reason I keep my phone on now is sometimes you can take a picture of what's happening. But it's a case of being able to settle into that moment of now. And literally, when you are present, when you're in the now, and you experience the most important moment in poker is what I call the pause, because you're in a hand and you're about to make a decision. And rather than jumping into a decision, it's taking that breath and taking a moment and saying, okay, what's going on now? What is it? What are the options that I have now? And it's elegant because in poker, it is an illustration that we never, ever have it all. We never, ever know it all when we make decisions. And many times when we make a decision, something's going to go wrong. Or, we made the bad decision based on what happens next. So I made this intention when I sit down at the poker table. I intend to make correct decisions with the information I have, and I intend to remain unattached to the outcome. That in itself is the most amazing place to be, because you become the witness rather than the one who gets involved with, oh my God, I lost that hand. What did I do wrong? Because what I was originally doing is I would lose hands and then I would sit down and start evaluating. I'm going, what did I do wrong there? And that is the incorrect way to look at it, because when you're looking at a past, you want to pull up the situation. You want to say, first of all, what did I do well? Even though you're going, oh God, I didn't do anything good. That's just first of all, change the energetics of the thought.
Mm.
What did I do well? And then rather than saying, what did I do wrong? What might I have done differently? And all of a sudden it changes, because you can start evaluating it. And then what can I do next time? In the next time in a hand like this. And when you do that, you give yourself the ability to be objective without getting your emotions involved. Now, if by chance the emotions, if you go on tilt, that's a term on poker when you're going,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
if you go on tilt, you go, okay, bring the situation up, and you've got all this trauma in your head. You're going, okay, what's going on? Talk to me. And you just had this little conversation with this perfection witch or this bitch that's in your head, and acknowledge it. Don't disregard it. People say, oh, I never think negative thoughts. Well, bullshit. Everybody thinks negative thoughts, but you have to pull those negative thoughts out and you have to say, what is this trying to tell me? When I jumped out of the airplane in a tandem skydive, and I was the 55 seconds in free fall, before the canopy opens, I am freaking terrified going, "Why the hell did I do this?" It was as if it was 3 years and 55 seconds, 'cause all of a sudden I realized, "Wait a minute. I'm trying to expand because what's happening, it's pushing my arms back so much, it's literally tearing these muscles that haven't been used." I'm thinking, "I wanna expand," and it's telling me, "No, this is not a good idea. The most important thing is to release that which no longer serves you." And I thought, "Hell, can jumping out of a plane teach me that?" But that's what I heard, and that's what I learned in that moment. I've gone around in a circle. Did I answer your question?
No, you have, but what I'd like to do now is translate that into caring. Do you distance yourself from, the potential outcomes, like the DNRs and so on? How do you keep yourself, centered and, enjoying life, because it can be a bit of hard work and a bit difficult to be a life of a carer, certainly in the stage that you're in with your husband, for instance. So how does that feel? How does that translate back to being a carer? And
Well, it's about taking the time for yourself. When's a good time for me to be able to care for myself without ignoring him? And I end up getting up very, very early in the morning when the dogs are happy to after I let them out. It's like I say it's the time when I let the dogs out. Who let the dogs out? Woof,
who
woof.
let the dogs out?
And I let the dogs out, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I pick up the phone to check Substack, and I go and then 4 hours later, actually 3 hours later, I'm going, "It's 7 o'clock. Do I go back to sleep? No, just rest here and, take some time for yourself. Put the phone down." So I think it's finding the time when I can be by myself without ignoring him and find some way that he can help me with what I love to do. I
Mm.
love to write. I've got I've got an external drive that has several million words on it.
Hey.
We wanna be published. And so what I do with Substack is when I write a post, I want to turn it into a podcast, and I want people to hear my voice, but I want them to know that when you're listening to that audio that I'm reading the post, I'm speaking directly to you. So
Mm,
what I do to accomplish that is I connect with him. He's about 70 feet away from me right now because that's how long our home is.
mm.
And I connect with him on a Zoom, and I say, "Honey, you got your book?" Because he has a notepad there. If he hears something that doesn't work, he'll write it down because we've been creators together for many years. But I
Right.
wanted to figure how to do that because his brain is still there. And so I read it to him, and he's the most important person to me in the world. So when you hear it, you're gonna feel love from me because that's what I'm doing. And if it's not if it's not there, he'll say, "Record it again, please." I go, "Okay, what might I have paid attention to?" And he'll tell me. He will have marked down something. Or most of the time he'll say, "Ship it, baby."
Oh, you Americans have some lovely terms. I was on an expedition many years ago when I was in my late teens, and there was an American Master Chief there. It was a diving expedition. We were diving the wreck of the Pandora, which was a British ship that sunk with the mutineers from the Bounty and all that sort of thing. It was off the Queensland coast here, and he used to say, "Let's go jam some jugs." In other words, filling scuba tanks. So yeah, it was, and he had the big moustache and a big cigar and all that. He was Texan as well. So yeah, it all just for me as a young, wet between the ears teenager from a private school here, it was like, whoa, this is the world. So, but anyway, I digress. So when then, so you're a high functioning person and you've got a husband who you need to do a lot of caring for. What does caring cost a person who's a high functioning has a high functioning life? What are the impacts for you?
The impact has to do with lack of self-care. It goes back to that time and time again. And it has to do with finding balance. It's like balance between work-life balance. You hear that all the time. But it's the balance between work, that I don't consider work, and caregiving and self-care. So it's a triangle.
Hmm.
And then my poker competition. Yes, I am a professional poker player, but my playing has got back into recreational because of the fact that I choose not to travel often to play. When I do, I would have to put together a caregiving team for him because I want someone to be with him all the time. And I'm happy to say that I competed in a tournament 2 weeks ago. That's about 45 minutes from here. It was the first women's tournament
Hmm.
in Ocala, Florida, and I came in second. And
Congratulations.
I'm also happy to say that at Ocala, their first tournament, they opened in 2023, no, 2024, and it took them several months before they had a tournament, and I'm happy to say I won the first tournament there. So, he said, and I really wish I had won the ladies tournament so I could say, I won both first ones. But it was really interesting because I felt so satisfied. And it's to find, as caregiving, it's important for you to find what you are passionate about and
Mm,
do some of that. And if it's a case of having a hobby, something that, whatever. But I also feel like I'm getting back into doing more physical exercises, but I would never go to a gym anyway. I never did that. But I'm doing what Mama Peggy taught me to do every hour. She would show up right here beside this desk and she'd say, "Get your butt up. Get your butt up." She said, "Stay above the grass. You got to get your butt up." So she would say, "You got to get up for 5 minutes and walk." And then she would tell me when the weather was right, she'd say, "Go out and go hug a tree." And I said, "Mom, that's weird." She said, "No, it's not." Now, Mother wasn't into any of this woo stuff in her way. But in essence, what it is when you hug a tree, it's called grounding. You're actually grounding to the electronics, the electrical magnetic field of the earth because there is
yeah,
one.
yeah.
So go hug a tree. So it's balance. It's care, life, work balance. And it's important to be able to have caregivers who will give you respite, meaning they're caring so you can go do something.
Mm,
And I think it's important if they can figure out some way to financially be able to afford that. And the home healthcare aides are really quite inexpensive when you look at the cost of putting someone into a nursing home. They're
mm.
absolutely inexpensive. But we've gone through a lot of them. The one that we have now, we've had for 6 years. So she's just like my sister. She's the aunt of the dogs. I think they love her more than me. So it's balance. It's
Yeah,
always remembering you have to come first before the person that you're caring for.
yeah,
If you don't, it's like, the one about the airplane thing, put on your oxygen mask first. But we tend to ignore that. And when I forget it, My body tells me.
Yeah, and how does it tell you?
It hurts.
That's a great answer.
If I sit at this desk, I'm right at the desk where I write. If I sit here too long, more than an hour without getting up, I get up and my back hurts. My feet are unstable. Well,
Mm,
as long as I get up for 5 minutes every hour and just walk around the house, check on my hubby, play with the dogs. As long as I do that, I'm better.
mm,
And I think that if we put ourselves on a clock, regardless of what you do, to get up every 5 minutes, when I'm in a poker tournament, literally, I have my phone set on to go off every 55 minutes, and it rings, alarm. I say, and so I get up from the chair, and I walk around the chair, and I stand there for a few minutes, and I, you know, go back and forth on my feet. People look at me and they go, "We ought to do that." Sometimes other people get up while we're in a tournament.
yeah, it is
It's
important.
balance. It's balance.
Yeah. Yeah, in my book and my philosophy, it's about dynamic harmony because I don't think balance is actually something that's, sustainable or maintainable, you know? People talk about work-life balance. Doesn't exist. You've just said it yourself, 17 hours a day. I used to be a CEO and it nearly killed me. You know, literally, physically, the stress gave me, nearly knocked my heart for a 6. So, at least with dynamic harmony, it's an ebb and flow. You can have good times, you can have stressful times, you can have chilling times. I mean, I meditate for an hour every morning at about 5:30. I'm in a sit-stand desk here. It sort of goes up and down every 20 minutes, things like that. So I'm standing right now, for instance, when I do these sessions. So things like that. You're absolutely right. You've got to just keep moving, nice and simple. You know? So, where do you see at the start of this conversation, for those that have joined us recently, Donna mentioned a statistic that was it 70% of people are likely to die before the person they're caring for. And so, where do you see people slowly, if we go back to that comment, slowly disconnecting and like, are there any things with your sort of, teaching as a clinical psychologist about how people drift away from where they could have sustained themselves to where they end up, down with the grass, as your mum would call it?
Oh, ask that another way. I'm not quite with you.
Well, how do people drift into that lack of self-care? What are some of the things that you would think that they start disaligning or not aligning with themselves and not finding that dynamic harmony of being able to sustain life as a
I think
carer?
I think it has to do with simply being out of the present moment. There's nothing else that exists in this world except the present, regardless of how bad the situation is. It's taking a moment and saying, "Okay, here I am. Okay, how can I find something beneficial?" I mean, in the ER with my husband, even the nurses kept saying I'd go through to go to the restroom, and I'd be with a smile, and they would go, "We don't understand you." I said, "Why?" They said, "But you're always smiling." I said, "It makes me feel a lot better to smile." And I sat there in the room with him, and there's a part of me that panicked when he first said, "Just, put me on as a DNR," because I thought, "Okay, is he ready to go?" But I went, "All right, if that's the way he feels, that's okay. It's his choice." But I said I wanted to find the blessing, and the blessing in it was I was not connecting with him enough. I was being distracted doing my writing, and then I decided I had to set some time when I was with him every day, sitting, doing nothing but watching silly YouTube videos,
Mm-mm.
to be with him in the same room and have a little chat. And so it's our time in the morning to do that after he gets up and does his monitoring, and, we spend about an hour every day, and that's my time. It's on my calendar. And so that I said, "When can I connect with him more so that he feels more aligned?" And interestingly, the doctors he was in the hospital for 3 days because they actually tested him and he came out positive for COVID.
Oh, really?
And I actually think that I brought it to him because 3 days before, I had actually competed in that tournament, and no, not that tournament, I competed in a cash game, and I was at that cash game way too long. And frankly, there's one bad thing about poker. When it's live, there is nothing nastier than cards and chips. And and you really have to, have the hand sanitizer and, wash your hands a lot and, don't touch the chips and touch your face. And I think that I had been infected, but when I was tested COVID, it came out negative. But 2 days after he was, I felt awful. So I think we both had it. And fortunately, it was a lesser strain of it. But what the important thing was that I realized it was important to find ways to better connect. And I think that's it, is that we get into the place of caring for someone and we forget that it's important to communicate with them.
Mm. And if you're a carer and you've gone past that path, so you've gone too far, but it's not you haven't gone too far that you can't turn back in terms of self-agent, in terms of that self-preservation and so on, and self-care. But how do you rebuild the agency without abandoning your responsibility of being the carer?
Because I think that you can be a caregiver while you're communicating. It has to do with the communication. Now, granted, there are some people that have ailments when they can't communicate. And I think it's important for the people to realize being with them and communicating on all different levels is important. I just keep going back to communicating and figuring out when is that time that you can care for yourself.
Mm.
And I know I keep going back to the same thing over and over again, but that's that's my 2 cents.
Oh, your 2 cents are worth dollars. I mean, really, that's because as I said right at the start of this, at the introduction, it's easy to talk to people who are patients. There's plenty of those. Literally half the world over the age of 40 has a chronic condition. That's just a statistic that is global. And if you're older than that, then you even increase your chances of comorbidity, which is having more than one condition. I've got 3 of them. I had prostate cancer at 50, and then more recently a severe heart disease diagnosis. So we all have them. But what's hard to find are the invisible carers. I can find plenty of functional health professionals, but carers don't stand up. They don't be counted. And you're right, they don't. I suppose they don't respect themselves. Would that be a valid statement? They don't. They don't care for themselves. They don't. I'm not saying they. What am I trying to say? I'm just, just carers don't seem to have their own agency, have their own control. They don't find a balance. Although I must say, my wife has a perfect balance. We've found a way of just, she's here for me all the time when I need it, if I need it, and she's always there. She was there on the first prostate cancer consult with the specialist. Same thing with the heart disease. She's been there every single moment of every single day when it's needed, but she's not there when it's not needed.
God
Um,
bless her.
Yeah, she's fantastic. I don't want another one. Or as my father would say, he's still alive, as my father would say, "It's too hard to train a new one."
Well, my husband, we call my husband Hubs 3 because he's
Oh,
my
okay.
third. He's the third time is a charm, and
Yep.
and, and it's really important to give appreciation to the one who is caring, and I think sometimes when people are sick, they forget they don't really realize how much stress the one that's caring for them is under. Stress is it. I mean, the stress is huge. I stress ate a lot with Mama Peggy, and chocolate was my solution, by the way. And and I put on a few pounds, and I said, "Okay, is this important? Does it makes me feel better?" It doesn't because it makes it harder for me to move around. You know, I'm 6 feet 5 inches tall. Right now, I'm just under 200 pounds, and, I I'm happy to say that when mama died and passed in 2022, I was about 230, and I have not been on a diet of any kind. I simply have been more conscious of my eating,
Mm,
and I think that's important to do is to be conscious. If there's anything for a caregiver to do, it's to pause. It's to
yeah.
take a breath and say, "Okay," even if it's just you can have more relief in a single breath, and it doesn't I'm not one that can meditate for half an hour. That's not
Mm,
me.
mm,
But I can spend 5 minutes doing a mind shift exercise, and I've created dozens of them, and they're fun, they're play, it's almost like play,
mm.
and it's a way to shift the way you're thinking, and sometimes and journaling, do a lot of journaling. That's really important to do, by the way,
Yep.
because you wanna write down what you're feeling, and it
One of the benefits for journaling is this. I do journal, but it's not something I do for therapy, so to speak. Although when I was first diagnosed with the heart condition, my psychologist said, "You've got to start getting creative." Because I'm an engineer, but that's my day job is an engineer, and it's very linear, whereas creativity, it's enjoyable. And so that's, I wrote a book and so on. But what do you get out of journaling, or what's the psychology in journaling?
journaling's important because, first of all, you wanna do it with a pen and paper. You don't wanna journal on the computer because you want to be connected. I first got into journaling really seriously when a woman wrote a book called Writing Down Your Soul, and I thought someone gave me the online course, live online it was the first one that I ever took online. It was 2002 or 2003,
Mm,
and she said, "You have to have a book and write it down," and it was a case of setting a standard place to journal, have a protocol, take 2 glasses of water, and I said, "Is this stupid or what?" She said, "Okay, fine, I'll do this." And then start writing and just write your feelings and whatever it is, and what happened eventually was things were coming out that I'm going, "Holy moly, is that really what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling?" It's therapeutic without saying you're doing this for therapy, because you wanna write down those ugly thoughts, you wanna write down the emotions. You'll put once you put them on paper, once you take a negative thought and you put it on paper, this is what happens. It is finite. It's no longer out there and around you. It is now finite and on that paper. And you can go, "Oh, do I want that? No." It's amazing what journaling does. It's huge because thank you for mentioning that because my upcoming book that is the companion book for Mind Shift on Demand is a 10-day self-talk transformation guidebook.
mm,
And it's about taking 10 areas of your life and every day look at that area and say, "What am I saying negatively about that?" Write it down. And then there's ways that you can reframe those statements into what I call well-crafted why questions that you then ask yourself at night, because the 5 minutes before you go to sleep, the things that you say and the things that you feel is what your subconscious works on. Subconscious never goes to sleep.
Mm.
It's amazing what you can do. It's something
Yeah.
like when my husband has trouble sleeping, I said, "Okay, honey, what are your 3 questions?" He said, "Okay, fine, I'll use them." I said, "What are they?" "Why is it so easy to fall asleep? Why do I sleep so restfully? Why do I wake up refreshed?" Simple questions like that. Every time he does it, he falls asleep almost like magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a routine as well. I mean, those are interesting questions, and you and I'll take this offline and have a chat about that a little bit further because I do love your first book, and what you have to offer is fantastic. Um, so you're, y- I mean, you're writing, you're poker playing. You strike me as somebody who thrives in life. Would that be correct?
I think I do.
Yeah. So how do you thrive with the constraints of being a carer? So because, as you say, you're limited in terms of the distance you can travel from or, the time you can travel away from your husband, et cetera. How do you thrive within constraints?
Well, first of all, I don't look at it as constraints.
Great.
That's a word that I'm disallowing in my life. But
Excellent. So how do you rephrase that or reframe that then?
it's the situation. How do I thrive in a situation that might be confining? In the caregiving situation, is that every single day and every single moment, I want to find some joy within that. Even when I've lost my temper, I'm going, "Okay, what is that telling me?" And I am less likely to lose my temper today than I was years ago.
Mm,
But I think it's a case of just simply finding some joy. And what's really important, I'm 76 years old. I will be 77 in April. 77. And when I get hit 77, 76 trombones. It's like I'm singing a song. And it's what I have discovered. And I'm looking around me, and we think that we need lots of things around us. We think that we need a lot of money, but what we need is joy. What we need is family. What we need is people that we love and love us. And we need, if there's any need, because need indicates lack,
mm,
what we desire. The most important thing for us to desire is to love first ourselves, regardless of what we've gone through during our life, all the many conflicts that I've had, all the mistakes I've made. I want to say that the one thing is I truly love who I am. And if I look back and say, would I have done that in the past? Well, I might not be me, and I do love me. So
mm.
it's because this is the 2nd of February. So last year, 2025, January 26th, I published my first confessional post. And it was when I had never written about openly on a public platform that I was a convicted felon. And I said, I am sick and tired of keeping this to myself. I don't want to go to my grave with all these secrets that I think it's important. I was afraid people would judge me. I had all the shame. And I said, I want to get that shame out of my life. And then I wrote a second one, another confessional post. And then I wrote a third one. And I said, holy shit, I am exhausted. And my fourth post was emotional hangover recovery. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about journaling, because that's basically what I do with publishing. And my Substack publication was first Poker's Life Lessons, because there's so much that parallels life and relationship at the table, so much of it. But after a year, on the 1-year anniversary, I changed the name to Self Talk with Donna. The reason being everything under it, whether it's poker, whether it's caregiving, whether it's business, whether it's public speaking, has to do with the words that we say to ourselves. Our self-talk is what is important for us to change. If we ignore the self-talk, If we say we're sick, we will remain sick. When I had my stroke in 2013, I had a massive center left brain stroke. Left center brain, I was completely muted except for 2 words. I could say Donna and crap. Actually, I could say 3 words, and I won't tell you what the first word was out my mouth. And I decided I had a choice. I could either buy into the fact that I was an invalid, I could not speak, or I could simply be an observer. And so I detached and observed. I started doing one specific mind shift exercise that is my signature mind shift exercise. I did it for about 100 times in 3 days. And the healthcare team said she will never be able to speak clearly again. It'll take her 8 to 9 months before she can talk. And I chose to simply detach from that, disregard it, cancel it, and I was able to speak clearly in 3 days. And that has to do with the words that you say to yourself. So for caregivers, I would say write down what words you say to yourself. Whatever your business is, if you're a professional speaker, write down the words you say to yourself. If you're publishing on Substack, write down the words that you say to yourself about your publication. We all try to be perfect. I've had a perfection witch that comes in and out, and she comes in and tries to sit on my shoulder, and I keep evicting her and tell her that she's not paying rent. She doesn't belong there. Get the hell out. So we have those things, and you don't know what they are until you write them down. So what are you saying to yourself? Whatever it is. When you said, I have a heart disease, I went, okay, your heart's having some issues. But when we say, I have that and I own that, energetic, it's worse. So, I never talk on social when I have something that's physically bothering me. If I do, people are going to send that disease energetics. So just love your heart. Have a conversation with your heart. Thank your heart for being well. And I promise you, you change your words about your heart, and your heart's going to heal faster. I know standard doctors don't believe me, but it does work.
No, I totally agree with you. It's like I'm getting an evaluation from my school teacher, because my psych said to me back months ago, like when we first did it. So originally, we actually used some traits of a disassociated personality to actually compartmentalize some stuff that I just couldn't. Because when you get diagnosed with a condition, and you know it yourself, it's the first thing is, oh crap, this
Crap.
is it. This is it. I'm done. Is that really the situation? And no, it's not. It's how you, like exactly what you're saying, how you reframe it yourself and mentally and internally and so on. And so we did that, and it worked really well. And when I first was diagnosed, it was like 2 years ago now. My heart age, according to the Australian government's evaluation process, was 83, and now it's actually my chronological age, which is 58. So in 2 years, it is disassociated from me, so to speak. And in terms of the condition, I'm the healthiest I've ever been. In fact, a recent stress test, etc., I'm healthier than 83% of men my age.
Yeah.
I don't drink alcohol, don't eat red meat. There's all this stuff that I don't do. I've got a naturopath. I've got a TCM practitioner, a Chinese medicine practitioner, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. And it works, and it's fantastic. And half of that is a mindset thing. And I suppose that's a really important part for people with chronic conditions as well, is it's a mindset thing, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's interesting because Mother owned the concept of being a diabetic. And I said, and the way she said it, every time she said it, her blood sugar got worse.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I said, Mom, how about you consider that you're insulin resistant and that this might be temporary. And if you can talk to your body and have it be more cooperative with the insulin. Mama said, "That's really stupid." And I said, "Well, I don't care. Can you give it a shot?" And she did, and she started changing the way she talked about it. And there's something called an A1C, which is a blood test that shows what your blood sugar has been over 3 months. And they want it to be under 7. I don't know how they figure it, but Mother's was well over 8, and she started changing the way, and she was on medication, but the doctor said, "Oh," the doctors would say, "Oh, you'll never get any better." And I would say, "Stop it. Stop talking to my mother like that. You are diagnosing that she will not be any better." And they said, "Well," I said, "Stop it. Do not talk to my mother like that." And they're going, "Yes, but." I said, "Don't but me." And she started doing that. She started talking about it differently, and in a short time, her A1C dropped under 7. And the doctor said, "We've never seen this happen before." I said, "Duh. Just change the words that you say to yourself." And I don't understand why it works, but I know that you can talk to your body because I had the first instance of AFib where my heart was out of rhythm in 2011, and it scared me. And I owned the disease until I said, "Wait a minute, you're owning this." And they said I had 3 unsuccessful heart ablations, meaning they went in to kill cells in the heart, which is supposed to take care of it. And I woke up from this, I thought, "This is gonna be great." And there's this young, good-looking doctor at the foot of my bed. He's going, "If she doesn't reset by 8 o'clock, we'll have to do something radical." And I went, "Holy shit." And so I said, "When can I walk?" And they allowed me to get up in about an hour from then. And I started saying, "Okay, what do I want to do? I would like to have a conversation with my heart." And I was going about 130 beats a minute. It's about twice what my heart rate is. And I was doing I was in by Gemini, which is every second beat, I was throwing an extra beat.
Mhm.
And it was just so I went up to the desk of the nurse and I said, "Can you please pull me up and verify that I am in AFib and in the word by Gemini?" She looked at me. It was like she was a puppy dog. Like, "What?" And she said, "Okay, you are." I said, "Okay, mark that. I'd like for you to mark down the time that it is now." And as I recall, it was 5:23. Not quite remember the time, but close to that. So I started walking down the hall and I'm going, okay, I'm going beat, 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 beat. I'm smiling. I'm breathing. Beat, beat, beat. And I felt myself go back into rhythm. And I said, "Thank you so much for that." And I walked back up and I said, "Hi, I'm Donna Blevins. I was here a few minutes ago." "Yes, you were." "You have that time to the right?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Can you double check and confirm that I'm in sinus rhythm?" She looked at me. She checked. She said, "Yes." And I said, "What time it is?" And as I recall, it was about 7 minutes lapsed. And I had been out of rhythm for several months, but
Oh,
I had been in fear. And it was the fear and the anxiety and the stress that was keeping me there rather than being at that place of joy and talking to my heart and saying, "Thank you very much for letting me know I've been in too much stress." Anyway, it's things that you can do amazingly well to heal.
so going back to carers though, how would they shift there? Because what you're talking about there is in some ways identity shift, in some ways is changing thought processes and so on. What are some of the sort of simpler things that people could do as carers to get their self-care back in line again?
Find 5 minutes here and there to Have a cup of coffee, 5 minutes just for yourself. Find some way that it's just to, go hug a tree. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but you've got to remember to take time for yourself and get to that place. And it's like a pause in your life, and pause is the magic word. In poker, it's the pause before you make a decision. It's
Mm,
where you have to take a moment to think before you do that. And it's the same with caregiving, especially if you're dealing with somebody who's cranky and they may have a bad temper, especially if you're dealing with something like an Alzheimer's where the late phases of it, they're very aggressive.
mm,
It's when you feel like you're going to react, it's a case of taking a breath. And it's a breath. It's amazing what can happen in a breath. So caregivers, carers, as you call them,
mm.
I think it's important for them to breathe more, pause more, and do that during the day rather than saying, "How do I feel? What do I want to be? What do I desire in this moment?" Just that simple breath, and I feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's just one last question I have because I do try and keep this down to around the hour mark. But, Donna, if if you were back at the time when you've been a carer most of your life by the sound of it, but, let's say with your husband's, situation, if you were back then when he was first diagnosed, what would you say to yourself or to somebody who's just just starting the caring journey? What would you say to them in terms of what they've got, coming forward, going into the future?
Well, I think rather than manifest the fact that it's gonna be a pain in the ass, it's gonna be a lot of work, I think it's to find the joy and the gratitude right now. I mean, simply, there's a philosophy of starting every day with writing down some gratitudes, and I don't care if you're in the middle of a crisis, it's what am I grateful for? And that's the key. It's rather than looking at sometimes people take a diagnosis and they see the worst in it, and I beg people to shift away from that thought. Sure, you wanna know what the situation is, you wanna know how you can care more, but you want to pause, you want to love on yourself. You wanna say, "Okay, there's something here that is joyful about this. What the hell is that?" And I promise you, when you look at it like that, things change.
Mm. Wow. All right, Donna. Well, it's been an absolute joy having you. I mean, you're such a ball of energy. The stuff that you talk about on your Substack and everything. For anybody who's not seen Donna's work, check out Dr. Donna Blevin. She's fantastic. She was actually one of the testimonials in my book. Thank you very much for that, Donna. And I actually got her name spelt wrong in the book originally, and we had to adjust that. Thank you for picking that up, Donna.
Oh, you're
Um,
welcome.
we both missed that one. But yeah, you're an absolute delight. And the stuff that you do in your 70s, most people would struggle to do in their 50s. So you're an absolute inspiration. Is there anybody in the audience there? There's a few people on here. Have you got any
Oh,
questions?
well, let me tell you what, there is. Helen Groom is here, and she is a co-founder of Legends Lounge with me. We're gonna be hosting a podcast called Legends Lounge. Hello, Helen. It's nice to
Fantastic.
see her. And she is an amazing woman, and she has developed the Pity Party Pivot, and what she's done, you've got to follow her. She's brand new to Substack. I've been saying, "You gotta go." In fact, it was her son that was the skydiver instructor that was the tandem that had my back jumping, so it was her son.
Right.
And she's only done 2 Substack publications, just started, and they're fabulous. You gotta go over to Helen Groom and read her stuff, and you're gonna go, "Wow, she's an amazing woman." So that's and I
Wow.
don't who else do I know here? I don't let me see here. I guess she's the only one I know, but she's the most important.
Well, I've got Steve there. He's one of my guests coming up in the near future. He's a hospice nurse and travels around in one of those Airstream caravans, those big, lovely stainless steel looking things, shiny things. So we'll be having our chat there in a few weeks' time. To everybody who's been online and to those of you listening who are carers, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Donna, thank you very much for taking part, and we'll see you again on the next episode.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'm honored.
Thank you, Donna. The honor's mine. Absolutely. Bye, everybody. See ya.